Hello everyone, this lecture is going to be covering the rest of chapter 5 on the integumentary system. So this will be part 2. Okay, so in the first part we talked about just the skin, so the epidermis, dermis, all of the different structures, so the different glands, sweat glands, oil glands, as well as some sensory receptors. The second part, we're going to be talking about some other parts of the integumentary system, as well as functions of the integumentary system. Okay, so let's start by talking about hair. So a hair is just made up of dead keratinized cells. So the same cells that make up your epithelial tissue. A lot of functions to hair, so keep insects off skin, guard against some physical trauma, provide a little bit of a cushion, protect from heat loss, and then also shield the skin from sunlight. Okay, so hairs, again, flexible strands of dead keratinized cells. They're produced by hair follicles, which are found within the scalp. They contain hard keratin, which is different than the keratin that you find in the epidermis of your skin. In your skin, you have soft keratin, but hard keratin is tougher, more durable, and the cells don't flake off. So remember, on the stratum corneum, the most superficial layer of your skin, you have the dead keratinocytes. And as new cells are created below, the dead cells on top are going to flake off, and you're going to shed them, and those will be what leads to dandruff and a lot of the dust in your house, actually. But your hair has hard keratin. So those don't flake off like that, which is good because it keeps your hair intact. There's two regions of your hair. You have the hair shaft, which is the area above the scalp. Okay. In that area, the keratination of your cells is complete. And then underneath your scalp is the root. So that's the part of the hair that you wouldn't be able to see. And keratinization is still going on down there. Okay, so kind of like in your epidermis, the deepest layer, the stratum basale, is producing the cells, and as they move up, they develop and die and become keratinized. Same thing's kind of happening in your hair. Okay. Interestingly, hair pigments are made by the melanocytes that can be found in the hair follicles. So very similar again to the skin. Melanocytes make melanin. Like I mentioned before, you can have different types of melanin. So there's a melanin that's more yellowy, rust-colored brown, and black. And the amounts of melanin that your melanocytes produce and the colors of melanin determine what your hair color is going to be. Red hair is not created by that melanocytes. There's a additional pigment called pheomelanin pigment. That is what makes your hair red. And gray or white hair results when the melanin production decreases, and instead of having that pigment in the shaft, you actually end up with air bubbles in the shaft, which is kind of cool. So it's kind of just the lack of pigments from the melanocytes that's producing the gray or white hair. Obviously, hair like that's pink or green or whatever is just dyed, and you're adding in artificial pigment into your hair shaft. Okay, so that's not natural. Okay, some other hair structures. So again, your follicle is going to be under the skin, and it's going to extend from the epidermal surface down to the dermis. At the very bottom of the follicle, you have a hair bulb, which is going to be kind of like a rounded area right at the bottom. Around the bulb, you have what's known as a hair follicle receptor, which is sensory nerve endings that actually wrap around the bulb itself, and allows you to feel like the movement of your hair. If someone like touches your hair or the wind blows it, you can feel that because of those nerve endings around the bulb, which is interesting because hair is actually considered a sensory touch receptor. Okay, so in all the receptors we talked about, there's something that can stimulate them. So on the pressure on your skin, you're actually activating those touch receptors. And because hair, when it moves, it activates the nervous system, that's actually considered a receptor, which is kind of cool. You have the hair matrix, which is the dividing area of the bulb. So it's part of the bulb that's actually producing the hair cells. Okay, so as the matrix is making new cells, it pushes the older ones upward, and that's what's causing the hair to grow. Okay, and then my favorite hair structure is the arrector pili muscle. So it's a small band of smooth muscle that is attached to your hair follicle. Okay, so every hair follicle has a little muscle attached to it, and it's what's responsible for creating goosebumps. So when you're cold and your hair stands up, it's the arrector pili muscle contracting, and it's a smooth muscle, so it's innervated by your nervous system, and that's what causes the hair to stand up. Same thing as if hair stands up on animals or cats. That's, the nervous system again activating those arrector pili muscles to stand up. Okay. So here's kind of an image, maybe not the best thing. So this would be under the skin. So you have the hair follicle. At the very bottom, this round part would be like the hair bulb underneath. And there's different parts of it. You don't need to know all of these things. I'm not worried about all those little things. Okay. But you should know the root is under the skin. The shaft is above the skin. I thought I had an image to show this, but I guess not. The bulb is at, the follicle is what is around kind of the hair itself. The bulb is around the very bottom of the follicle. Okay, you can see here, it's kind of cool, those little melanocytes that are producing the color that's going to go into the hair itself. All right, there's two different types of hair. So we have vellus hairs, which are pale, fine body hairs. So children, all their hair is going to be vellus, and then adults, like your body hair, hair covering just like your arms, more prominent in females than males. And as you age, those vellus hairs turn to terminal hairs. They're more coarse and longer. So they're the ones on your scalp and eyebrows, and at puberty in the axillary, your armpit and genital regions, you will have terminal hairs growing. Also the face and neck hair of males. Nutrition and hormones do definitely affect hair growth. And follicles cycle between active and regressive phases. So there's sometimes that the hair follicle is being active and growing hair, sometimes it's not. You have an average of 2.25 millimeters of hair growth a week, which you don't need to know, but I just thought it was kind of cool. And on average, you lose 90 scalp hairs every day. I feel like I lose more than that, but I guess maybe it's 90. I've never counted. Okay. And then losing hair, thinning of hair. Alopecia is just a hair thinning that happens in both sexes after age 40. So as you age, you can lose those hairs and your hair will start to thin out. True baldness is different than just alopecia. So alopecia is just your hair starts thinning. But if you're actually bald, it's genetically determined. So it's nothing you can do about it. And definitely sex influence, which means it's more prominent in males than females. Male pattern baldness is caused by a follicular response to a specific hormone, dihydrotestosterone, that's present. So it's genetic. Can't really do anything to stop it unless you get hair transplants or something. But I think bald is cool, right? Shrek looks good, so I'm not worried about it. But also I'm not a dude, so that might not be fair of me to say. But a lot of other things can influence your loss of hair. So these two phases that I mentioned, these like regressive phases where hair is not growing, if you are really stressed or have hormonal changes or like some sort of trauma, I can't spell today, sorry, trauma, or a poor diet, that can lead you to be in the your follicles to be in the regressive phase more than the active phase. So things can definitely influence the way your hair is growing. And, even drugs or not having enough protein, things like that can really influence the health of your hair. So a lot of things kind of going on there. Okay, so that's hair. Also part of our integumentary system is nails. Nails are scale-like, it's kind of gross, modifications of the epidermis that contain, again, like the hair, the hard keratin. So they are going to be obviously on the ends of your fingers and the toes, so the most distal places in your body. And the function is really just kind of like a protective cover. Protective cover of the distal, again, dorsal surface of your fingers and toes. Some structures I'll show you in an image soon, but you have the free edge, nail plate, and nail root. Nail bed is underneath the epidermis. Is the epidermis underneath the nail. I'll show you all these images, the images of all this in a second, and go over them again. And then you also have the nail matrix, which is the thickened portion of the nail bed that is responsible for the nail growth. Okay. So I'll first go over the ones I just talked about. So we have the free edge of the nail, which is the part of the nail that overhangs, that you would like cut. Nail bed is the epidermis that's underneath the nail itself. The nail plate is the top part of the nail that you would like paint. The nail matrix is this part of the nail bed that's very deep here and is what's responsible for growing the nail. Okay, we also have some other structures here. The epichyme is a nail fold, which is just a piece of skin, but it projects onto the surface of the nail body. So the epichyme is the cuticle. So the same thing, if you ever look at your nail, the cuticle is a fancy word, epichyme. Hyponychium is the area under the free edge. So it's another kind of nail fold, but it's skin fold, but it's underneath the free edge there, where you're to get like dirt or something stuck under your nail. And nails normally appear pink because of underlying capillaries. So again, the hemoglobin in our blood is the pigment that is going to go through and you're going to see. And the only part that's different is you have the lunulae, which is this like white area kind of close to the epichyme. Okay. So the lunulae is that white part, and it appears white because it is the nail matrix underneath the nail. So it's thicker, so you can't see the hemoglobin underneath. Okay. So your nails should have a normal shape and color. And again, like your skin, abnormal shapes or whatever can indicate diseases. So these are just kind of fun facts. But yellow tinge can indicate respiratory or thyroid gland disorder. Thick yellow nails indicate a fungal infection. Coeliacia, I've never said that out loud, which is what the picture is an outward concavity of nail that can signal iron deficiency. And Bowes lines are horizontal lines across the nail. They can indicate severe illnesses such as diabetes, heart attack, or cancer chemotherapy. So again, like your skin, a lot of these, abnormalities can indicate that something's wrong. You can kind of figure out what's going on, or at least get an indication of what may be going on by looking at your nails, which is cool. Okay. And then the last part of chapter 5 is just talk about the functions of the skin, which a lot of these are kind of intuitive, but I thought I'd go through them. So first and foremost, skin is a barrier, right? Protecting your body from the external environment. So it protects, regulates body temperature, is responsible for cutaneous sensations, metabolic functions, blood reservoir, and excretions of waste. So I'll talk about all of these on upcoming slides here. So first, let's talk about protection. Obviously, skin is going to be exposed to microorganisms, different abrasions, right, little cuts and scrapes, temperature extremes, very hot, very cold, and also potentially harmful chemicals. So the skin has 3 different barriers that it provides: a chemical barrier, which we'll talk about, physical, and also biological barriers. So a chemical barrier, skin secretes chemicals, technically, so sweat, which contains different antimicrobial proteins, help kill proteins on the surface of your skin. Sebum and also this defensins, which kill bacteria. And this is the same thing, defensin. So there's a lot of different antimicrobial chemicals being secreted by the skin, which is good because it helps kill bacteria before it has a chance to enter. Another defense it has is it has what we call an acid mantle, which means the surface of the skin has a low pH. Okay, and this is so that it stops bacteria on the surface of the skin from multiplying. So it doesn't give the bacteria a good environment to multiply, which again is going to help protect the body from potentially harmful bacteria getting in. Okay, and then another chemical barrier, melanin. The pigment produced by melanocytes is technically a chemical as well, and it protects against UV radiation. Okay, so those chemicals protect against bacteria and then UV radiation. We have a physical barrier, which is thanks to those flat, dead, keratinized cells of the stratum corneum and lucidum in thick skin that are surrounded by glycolipids. So remember those sugars attached to the fats on the cell surface. We talked about that in one of the earlier chapters. But those cells block most water and water-soluble substances from just leaching into the skin, which is important because you don't want to just be, sitting in the pool and your body just absorbs all the water, right? That would not be good. Some chemicals do have limited penetration of the skin, some lipid-soluble substances, some plant, whatever that word is, like poison ivy. The chemicals in poison ivy can get in. Acetone, paint thinner, heavy metal, some drugs, and other drug agents that pharmaceutical companies use. I'm not going to ask you to memorize these, but just know that we have a physical barrier with the skin. And then the skin is also a biological barrier. So we have cells that are actively getting rid of microorganisms and bacteria. So we have phagocytic cells. So the dendritic cells of the epidermis engulf foreign antigens and present them to white blood cells, which activates the immune response. In 208, you'll talk about the immune system and how all of that works in more detail. Your dermis contains macrophages. Remember, in your loose areolar connective tissue in the papillary layer of the dermis, you have macrophages. They're also going to activate the immune system. And then DNA can absorb harmful UV radiation to an extent, right? Melanin helps protect it, but to an extent, DNA can absorb it and converts it into heat. Okay. So the skin's a physical, chemical, and biological barrier, protects, also responsible for body temperature regulation. So normally, your body under normal or resting body temperature, sweat glands still produce about 500 milliliters a day of unnoticeable sweats. So this is called insensible perspiration. Okay, so even if you're not like sweating and you can like feel yourself sweat, you're still producing sweat. That's just happening all the time. If your body gets too hot, you will have dilation of dermal vessels, which increase sweat gland activity to produce up to 12 liters or 3 gallons of noticeable sweat a day. Okay, so that's a shit ton of sweat. But this is known as sensible perspiration. Okay, so that helps cool the body off if you're too hot. And if you're too cold, your dermal blood vessels will constrict to drop the skin temperature. So you're not losing as much heat. Okay. Your skin also has cutaneous sensations, which we already kind of talked about, but we have these sensory receptors that are part of the nervous system that respond to stimuli outside of the body, such as temperature, touch, and pain. So we talked about those specific types before. You can see them here. You can see these sensory nerve fibers with the free nerve endings up here in the papillary layer of the dermis, different corpuscles. They're not all in this image that we talked about earlier, but those are a few of them. Right, but being able to sense and perceive your external environment is really important. Metabolic functions. So skin can synthesize vitamin D, which is needed for calcium absorption in the intestine. So it's really important. Chemicals from keratinocytes can disarm some carcinogens. Keratinocytes can activate some hormones. And skin makes this collagenase, which aids in natural turnover of collagen to prevent wrinkles. And obviously, as you get older, that probably doesn't happen as easily, but metabolic functions just helping the body, do other things. Skin is considered a blood reservoir, so it can hold up to 5% of the body's total blood volume, which is quite a bit. And if other organs need blood, the vessels in the skin can be constricted to move blood into other areas of the body. So if you're exercising a specific muscle or something, that tissue is going to need more blood supply. So your skin will constrict its blood vessels so the blood will go elsewhere. Okay, and then finally the last function, all these are pretty self-explanatory, but excretion. So again, we talked about sweat. So skin secretes limited amounts of different nitrogenous wastes, such as ammonia, urea, uric acid. So it can excrete that through the skin. Some of that stuff is excreted through urine as well. And skin can cause salt and water loss. So again, that might not necessarily be a good thing, but you can excrete substances through the skin. All right. And there's a lot of different ailments and conditions that your skin can develop. A lot of them can be disorders that are infections. But two things I want to talk about are skin cancer and burns. So I don't know if the professors normally talk about these in this lecture. It's my first time teaching it, but I think it's important to talk about skin cancer specifically, just so everyone, has some basic understanding of these different types of cancer and what to look for. So most skin tumors are benign, which means they're not cancerous and they don't spread or metastasize, okay? But some of them definitely do metastasize and can spread really easily, which is not good, okay? Some risk factors of all skin cancer: overexposure to UV radiation, so being out in the sun unprotected too long, too frequently, and then frequent irritation of the skin can also be a risk factor. So there's 3 types, which we'll go through each of these. First type is basal cell carcinoma. Least malignant, meaning it doesn't spread very much, right? And most common. So the stratum basale cells in basal cell carcinoma proliferate, and they slowly invade the dermis and hypodermis. Okay, so those cells are going to just start growing and then move into other areas they're not supposed to be in. This one's not very dangerous. It normally can be cured by surgical excision in 99% of cases. That's what it would look like. Next, we have squamous cell carcinoma. Second most common type, it can metastasize, right? So it can move around. It involves keratinocytes of the stratum spinosum. It's usually a scaly, reddened area on the scalp, ears, lower lip, hands. There's a pretty good prognosis if it's treated. Usually it's removed surgically, or you can get radiation therapy. So it's going to be really scaly looking, red, kind of look very irritated. And then the last type I want to talk about is melanoma. So this is cancer of the melanocytes that produce melanin. It's the most dangerous because it's highly metastatic and is often resistant to chemotherapy. So it spreads really quickly and is hard to get under control. Typically, if they're treating it, there'd be a wide surgical excision. So they would cut off a large area of skin to make sure they got all of the cancerous tissue, as well as immunotherapy. Okay, and there's a rule for looking at these, skin issues and figuring out if it's melanoma or not. So it's the A, B, C, D rule. So A is looking for asymmetry. Okay, so if you have asymmetrical spots, so the 2 sides of the pigmented area don't match, that's an issue. B stands for border irregularity. So if the spot is not perfectly round and it's kind of squiggly shape, irregular border, that's an issue. C is for color. Okay, so if there's a lot of colors in there, that can be a potential issue. So black, brown, tan, sometimes red or blue looking even. And then D stands for diameter. If it's larger than 6 millimeters, which is the size of a pencil eraser, that is a sign that it may not be good. Okay, so those are the things you want to look for. And it's really important that if you have spots that may be melanoma, you catch it early, because the earlier they can cut that cancerous tissue out, the better chances you have at beating it. Okay, and then the very last part of this section, talk about burns really quickly. So burns can be caused by a lot of different things. So heat is the main type of burn you think of, but also you can get electrical burns, radiation burns, or chemical burns. And all burns are doing is denaturing the proteins in your skin, which will end up destroying the cells. Okay. Immediate threat for burns is dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. This can lead to renal shutdown, so shutdowns of the kidneys, and also circulatory shock. Okay, and that's going to be just in cases where you have severe burns or very widespread burns. Okay, so the severity of burns you can classify as 1st degree, 2nd degree, or 3rd degree. 1st degree is the least severe. Only the epidermis is damaged. So you have redness, a little bit of swelling or edema, and pain. So like the fingertips here would just be a first-degree burn. Second-degree burn, your epidermis and upper dermis is damaged. In second degree, you're often going to see blisters. First and second degree are often referred to as partial thickness burns because it doesn't go through the whole skin, right? Just the epidermis and part of the dermis. And that would be, anything that's blistering, like down there. And then third degree burns are the most severe. Entire thickness of the skin is involved. A lot of times it goes down even to the hypodermis. The skin can turn a number of colors, kind of a gray-white color, bright cherry red, or it can be blackened. Okay, there is going to be no swelling, and the area is not going to be painful because the nerve endings are destroyed, so you can't feel anything. The blood vessels are all damaged, so you can't have water retention. With a third degree burn, you're going to usually need skin grafting, right? Which is taking skin from a different area of the body and putting it on top to try to restore some of those functions. Okay. And then just last slide here, ways they evaluate burns is called the rule of nines. I'm not going to really ask you about this, but it's kind of interesting. So your body is broken into 11 sections. Each of them represent 9% of the body's surface. So that's how they use, how they figure out, how much of the body is really affected. Okay, so the image here kind of shows front and back of the head and neck is 9%, each arm is 9%, anterior trunk, legs, you can see there. Burns are considered critical if over 25% has second-degree burns, over 10% has third-degree burns, or if your face, hands, or feet have third-degree burns. Okay, because those are areas that we really need to use. Treatment, typically, you have debridement, I don't know how to say that, just the removal of the burned skin, antibiotics, temporary covering, so bandages, and then skin grafts are often going to be necessary if it's a critical burn. All right, so that's the end of chapter 5. Let me know if you have any questions.